Welcome, friends of the Greasy Shop Rag. Today we're going to take a look at a Husqvarna 372XP chainsaw. Customer complaint is that fuel tank is broken. You'll see here in just a second after I remove this anti-vibe spring screw that everything forward of the handle just kind of broke off the tank. The tank doesn't actually hold fuel up at that point. It's just a mount for the handlebar. So this is going to be one of those cases where the customer replaced this saw. I should say he replaced a saw just like this with this saw, meaning he's got another 372 just for parts. And he brought both of the saws in and asked me to swap the tank over. It was a pretty smart play on his part that is finally paying off. He's got an extra fuel tank plus pretty much everything else except a piston and cylinder and whatever else went wrong with the old saw. Alright, let's get this thing stripped down a little bit further. There's the air filter cover. A little bit of dust in here, but it looks like he takes care of the saw. So what we need to do is, let's get this donor saw. We need to remove the fuel lines, the throttle cable. There we go. Another 372. As you can see, his part saw has a complete tank, although there is one screw missing in that handle. That's a little suspicious. We'll get to that later. So we'll remove these 4 screws. It doesn't look like the handle's bent in any way. The saw isn't all bent out of shape or anything from the handle twisting on it. Alright. Now I should say that I might as well have taken the clutch cover right off of here because there is a screw behind it I'm going to need to access. I should also say that I really don't need to take these screws out of here. I end up just going with it because it makes it easier for you guys to see what I'm doing. But you'll see here in a second that I kind of realized on the bench that I didn't need to do that. Here's his extra air filter. Right there I realized, well, I really didn't need to loosen them screws, but as long as they're loose, let's get this out of the way and then you get a better shot of what's going on here. So that's a tank vent line. It goes on a little fitting on the bottom of that carb tray and it had fallen off. And this is the fuel line that comes from the tank with the filter on it. Here's an anti-vibe mount screw. It's really not that big a deal to swap these tanks out. The throttle cable is hooked into a cam on the carburetor. And if I open the throttle and hold it that way, there's going to be slack in the cable. And then I can pop the ferrule of the cable out of that cam. And it's disconnected from the carb. I still need to remove the sheath of the cable from the holder right there. And now the only thing really holding the cable to the rest of the saw is the fact that it's pushed through a rubber grommet. Now we're going to remove our front anti-vibe screw. And again, I should have just taken this clutch cover off of here. There's a locating pin that needs to come out. Looks like he's got a good clutch cover for a spare part as well. Alright, this is that locating pin, and you'll see when I pull it out of here that it's a kind of a special looking bolt. It's not threaded all the way to the end. And that's because it locates that pocket right there on the fuel tank. Like a limiting strap. Alright, there are a couple wires on the kill switch that will have to be removed. I chose to pop the switch out and then pull the wires off. We could separate the tank from the chassis and reach in there and pop the wires off that way as well. There we go. There's another pocket on this side of the fuel tank, and it lines up with this little rubber buffer. And that's a tank vent right there. The tank vent hose remained with the saw, which is fine. These hoses are all kind of old. And we're going to have to go out and clean this up a little bit. Now you'll notice this throttle cable. It has a pocket on the trigger linkage that the end of the sheath of the cable fits into. You'll want to study that at this point. So when it pops out, when you're reinstalling the tank, you know how it goes back together. It's quite simple, but it's most likely going to pop out. Alright, we're going to give him a new fuel line and a new filter. Oh boy.
Wow.
Parts are flying. I should have just cut that fuel line and pulled it through. But, you know, I'm stubborn. Here's a part number on the fuel line I'm choosing to use on this. I don't know if it's the actual line, but it's the line that we stock. And it looks like it's the right length. This line comes with the end tapered already, so you won't have to cut it. And I'm just going to push it into the tank and then reach into the tank and pull it through. Just like that. And we can flush cut the end, put a filter on it. Okay. I just want enough line that the filter lays on the bottom of the tank, but I can also fish the filter out of the hole to service the filter. And then enough hanging out on this end to go up and reach the carburetor. I got a new piece of line for a tank vent. Alright, now we're going to have to do the same thing on this saw, remove the tank. And you'll notice I did the donor saw first. There's a good reason for that. I like to do that on most of my part swap kind of repairs like this. One, it's a practice run for fixing the good piece of equipment. And it also, it tells me if I'm going to need more parts. If I find the donor saw part is bad, or you know, maybe I saw that the tank vent was missing, or whatever it might be. I'll have all that information before I get started on this saw. All right, there is a rubber bushing. It's where your adjustment screws go through. There's the throttle cable. Our anti-vibe screw. Handle screws. It's pretty simple. We just did one, right? Alright, we're going to reuse that handle. Here's our locating screw. And this just kind of rocks out of here. Just got to clear the edge, and there it is. So on this one, you'll see that the kill switch wires are still connected to the switch. So you got to be careful not just to yank the tank off of there and wreck those wires. Here we go. So are there any parts on here we need to salvage? We're going to reuse his switch because he never complained that it was bad. And I never tested the switch on the other tank. And what else do we got? That's it. We're putting in the donor tank on. So what I'm doing is I'm pushing the throttle cable through the rubber dust boot on the bottom of the carb tray there. Now I'm going to push the fuel tank vent line up through a hole in the bottom of the tray, and the fuel line that has a filter on it. Now that I have all of that kind of in place, I'm going to have to get these kill switch wires on here. And you could argue that popping the switch out and pushing the wires through the hole, connecting them to the switch, and then pushing the switch back in might be easier. I did it this way. So you can see that the cable did pop out of the trigger. But there's a little slot that it fits into. It's easy to spot. It goes back in there very easy. You just got to remember to do it right now while it's accessible. Okay, we rock the tank over that rubber buffer back into place. And we'll get this anti-vibe screw locked in. On this side we have a AV screw up front and our locating pin. Remember, the locating pin is the funny looking one with the threads that don't go all the way to the end. I mean, we're just going in reverse order right now. Here's our handle. And I noticed that, you know, Husky puts a serial number tag underneath that handle. I don't know if it's there for like, you know, it's like a secret hiding spot for a serial number, if it's theft ID or what. It's not really sticking on there, but it's not going to go anywhere either once I got the handle screwed down. So I swapped it with the sticker from the other saw so that the number matches.
Stripped.
So this is the hole that had the missing screw. And yeah, it's stripped. I kind of suspected it would be. Let's see if any of these other ones are stripped out as well. That one looks good. And some of you are probably saying, well, you know, how come you're not backing up that plastic, that screw going into plastic, turning it backwards till it catches, and then turning it forward? People claim that that's the proper way to put a screw into plastic, and I'm not going to argue with them. But I also almost never have a problem. The driver that I'm using there has a rocker switch on it, and it would be very easy to run it backward for half a turn and then forward. But I don't, and I don't have problems. I am going to put this screw in by hand just so I can get a feel for whether or not this oversized screw I'm using is going to lock down. And I'd say it does. So that was stripped, and we fixed it by putting a bigger screw in it. Alright, we're going to cut the fuel line off, push it on the carburetor. Choke linkage looks good. Our tank vent line, I'm going to have to cut this to length. And then there's a little fitting on the bottom of that tray that it fits on. The whole idea here is if that hose wasn't on the tank vent would get plugged up with debris and probably not breathe properly. So this gives it a clean place for the hose to vent to. Alright, it's looking good. On this side we have our throttle cable. First we have to put it into the holder. And then we open up the throttle, drop the ferrule into the little catch. And I got it in there. Oh, that cable popped out of there again. So we open up the throttle, drop the ferrule in the catch, and there we go. Once it's in there the way it belongs, that cable's not going to pop back out of that trigger again. Alright, well, we had a donor tank and we assumed it didn't have any leaks, so we're about to find out. Spilled a little bit, but no leaks. Looks good. I don't see any fuel coming out of the vent. Throttle linkage all seems to be working properly. We'll put this grommet. I never have a good name for this piece. Boot, dust cover. Anyway, it's got a pin on the bottom that kind of locks it into place. Now we can put this engine cover back on. There's a little notch there where the spark plug wire locks into. And none of those screws are stripped. That's wonderful. A little bit of dust on their air filter. We're cleaning up. You know, we'll get this buttoned up here and see if it starts. And if it does, then that's all I'm going to have for you on the Husqvarna 372XP that needed a replacement fuel tank. Thanks for watching. Later.